Hey everyone, welcome back to the next episode of the First Gen Psychologist. This is a YouTube series that is focused on destigmatizing mental health as well as topics for personal empowerment and personal development centered on the first gen experience. I'm Dr. Lisette. I'm also the first gen psychologist. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I'm a first gen Latina psychologist, leadership coach, speaker, writer, and today I am your host. Today's topic is From Surviving to Thriving, prioritizing wellness as a first generation college student. And we'll be learning more about this from Dr. Lynette Navarro Sullivan, an LMFT, LPCC, and DSW. So let me share a little bit more about Dr. Lynn with you all. So Dr. Lynette, or Dr. Lynn, is a proud first generation Mexican American college graduate who began her educational journey at Moreno Valley Community College. She successfully earned her bachelor's degree in psychology from Cal State University San Bernardino, followed by a master's degree in counseling psychology from California Baptist University. She continued her educational pursuit at the University of Southern California, commonly known as USC, where she completed the Doctorate of Social Work program. Currently, she serves as a mental health supervisor at a community college while also working as an adjunct professor at another community college. With her license as a therapist and certification as a suicide prevention trainer, her primary focus is to empower first generation students. She aims to help them develop protective factors in their lives, eliminating barriers that contribute to academic challenges, mental health issues, and thoughts of suicide. So, Dr. Lynn, welcome. So happy and grateful to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Dr. Lizette. I appreciate you having me.
Awesome. So let's jump straight into the topic, which is, and so can you share your insights into some of the specific challenges that are faced by first generation college students when it comes to prioritizing their wellness?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have the honor of, like you mentioned, serving as a mental health supervisor at a local community college. And within the community colleges, most of the time, there's many first gen students, the first people in their family to ever go to college. And
Yeah.
myself being first generation, also college graduate. And so I think that the challenges are unique to everyone, but some of the common challenges that I see are one, imposter syndrome. They feel
Mhm.
like they're not meant to be there. They feel like they're a fraud, that someone's going to, kind of call them out and feel that they're not made to be in that role as a
Mhm.
college student or even that future career they have. So that's a really common one that I notice and that I hear from students. I also think that it's limited mentors. They don't really have anyone to go to express what they're
Mhm.
experiencing, what, the challenges that they have. And so then that contributes to the imposter syndrome as well.
Mhm.
Um, there's
Yeah.
also pressure from the family members and from, I think, just people around them. And it's a double-edged sword because the pressure is great because everyone's
Mhm.
saying, like, look at this,
Yeah.
my son or my daughter, they're in college, they're doing all these amazing things. They're going to be the first psychologist, the first therapist. And that's awesome to hear those praises, but it's also very scary because,
Mhm.
right, we're still in the grind of it, and we're not really sure if you're going to pass or fail, right? You're not really sure if you're going to make it to that
Mhm.
career right away. So there's some common things that I've noticed, and just again speaking for
Mhm.
myself, being first gen, I think what I've noticed is a lot of what the students are experiencing, which is why I love being a therapist at the college, because I can be relatable to say you're not
Yeah.
alone. I think most of us experience this. It's
Mhm.
normal to have these thoughts, these insecurities,
Absolutely.
these feelings related to, the challenges. But when it comes to the wellness component, I think what gets difficult about being first gen and prioritizing your wellness is that there's some real life things happening. So as first gen, unfortunately, we know is that there's some financial stressors that come with that. So if you're first gen, more than likely you might be the first person in your family to hopefully possibly make some type of decent income, some financial
Yeah.
stability. And so as you're, trying to go to school, you're probably working and also helping the family. And then you get in this financial scarcity trap. So basically, as a first gen student, you tend to only then focus on either it's school, I need to pass my classes, and it's
Yeah.
making the money, which then contributes, to a lot of the difficulty with prioritizing the wellness, because wellness is not a priority. You don't need that to survive. You need to make money to survive, and you need
Mhm.
to pass your classes to continue to receive your financial aid, to
Yeah.
continue to move forward and to ultimately reach your academic goal.
Yeah.
As much
Yeah.
as I think that,
Mhm.
there's a lot of families do support their first gen students in their college
Mhm.
education, I'll say that there's some lack of family support when it comes to understanding the boundaries. So,
Yeah.
right, again, there's the cheerleaders in the family that say, look at my kid, they're going to
Mhm.
school, they're going to make it, they're going to, make the family proud. But then when it
Yeah.
comes to the family expectations of, um, being there for the family, being at the family parties, helping with the cleaning, with the cooking, helping with the
Yeah.
bills, that's where it gets a little tricky and it starts interfering with their wellness, because the families don't really understand what it is to be a college student and the
Mhm.
demands, cognitively,
Yeah.
right? Emotionally, socially,
Yeah.
all those real aspects that we have to. We need to think about when we're trying to be a
Mhm.
well student. The
Yeah.
last thing, as I was kind of thinking about this question,
Mhm.
that comes to mind is I think the college readiness skills. So for some of us, maybe high school was an opportunity to really learn those college readiness skills, right? Some of us may have been avid, or
Yeah.
those special programs to uplift us and help us, but a lot of us were not. And so we're going into it just hoping for the best, taking those skills from high school and then using those skills we learned in high school and hoping that they apply in college. But what we find is that it doesn't. So I think that's another challenge, is those limited college readiness skills, as simple as time management, emotional regulation, studying skills,
Mhm.
being able to ask for help. Those again, I want to say natural skills that if you are raised in a family that
Mhm.
is from a college background, you are probably being prepared for that. But for first generation students, they're not
Yeah.
being prepared with these college readiness skills.
No, absolutely, and I love all of the, different examples that you've provided. One, starting one thing I don't think people do speak on enough is the mentorship component, and you spoke on that, like that can be
Mm-hmm.
hard. And you were sharing, sometimes people are really focused on, I have to pass my classes and I have to pay my bills. And we don't always make the time to
Mm-hmm.
develop those relationships and those connections. I don't know about you, Dr. Lynn, when you were a student, but I can say that I struggled with prioritizing office hours, because in my mind, when something was
Mm-hmm.
optional, and if like I could work during those hours, I would work to pay bills instead, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the more I've exited that system, or entered roles of, being an instructor or actually being on the other side of it and being able to understand, like, that's actually an important part of the curriculum. Like, office
Mm-hmm.
hours are where you receive that mentorship, where you receive the, like, additional guidance that you need to actually help you be more successful in these classes. So that part of it, and alongside with, all the different pressures, both sometimes positive, like encouragement from
Mm-hmm.
family, but then other times a bit overwhelming of thinking about how much you're having to hold and carry. So I think we started to speak on this a little bit, but I was wondering if you were willing to expand on it. I'm happy to expand on it with you as well. Is how have you noticed how it impacts the individual's mental health and well-being?
Yeah, absolutely. And if it's okay, I want to distinguish mental health from mental illness. And obviously, you
Okay.
psychologists, I think, are very aware of the difference, right, of mental health versus
Okay.
mental illness. But I think in our society, we tend to use those words interchangeably. And that's when students get confused and then they get
Yeah.
scared and they don't want to talk about these things, right? So, mental
Mhm.
health is something we all have because we all have a brain, and it's how
Yeah.
we cope, right? It's how we deal with life. It's how, we view ourselves, view the world, our social relationships. And then mental
Yeah.
illness, right, has to do more with a diagnosis. And so,
Yeah.
and I just like to clarify that because not everyone might know that. So I think what tends to happen is that as a first generation student, again, there's that double-edged sword. As it's exciting, but it's very scary. And so it impacts, our mental health and our well-being, because we start experiencing more stress in the general population, because there are people kind of expecting us to do well and maybe hoping for us to break that generational poverty cycle. And so that creates a lot of pressure. Also, then the worrying, right, starts to impact our well-being.
Mhm.
Is like, can I pass
Yeah.
this class? Am I smart enough? And so I think a lot of it is even the cognitive distortions, right? So as first
Yeah.
generation students, we have those cognitive distortions, the unrealistic thoughts that impact how we feel. Like,
Mhm.
if I fail this class, I'm not meant to be a therapist, right? Or if
Mhm.
I fail this class, I'm not meant to be a nurse. So that's kind of what I noticed. And I think even myself, looking back, um, when I was in school, I was so, just all those things that I mentioned before were so real, and it would create, honestly, a lot of stress and anxiety. And sometimes that would
Mhm.
lead to these passive suicidal thoughts, like, oh my, what if I fail?
Yeah.
What if I do fail? Will my
Yeah.
family be disappointed? Will
Mhm.
and should I just drop out? So I think that's really how it impacts our mental health and overall well-being. Just a lot of negative
Mhm.
thoughts, those cognitive
Yeah.
distortions, um, stress and worry.
Mhm. Yeah, and you know what? You mentioned this a little bit earlier, so I'm just gonna bring it back, was,
Sure.
those feelings of being a fraud or being an imposter, so,
Mm-hmm.
like, that's also part of the mental health, that, like, self-doubt that comes along with, I know you're talking about it as cognitive distortions, like the different thinking patterns that we engage in that increase our stress. I think
Yes.
that's the best way for me to summarize what that define at least what a cognitive distortion is. And you gave it a wonderful example. It's like sometimes we can catastrophize something when we're feeling
Mm-hmm.
anxious because it's something you've never experienced before. Like maybe this idea of like, oh, I'm nervous about passing. Maybe you were always having an easier time studying or grasping information, and for the first time you're not. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then needing to figure out how do you navigate that? How do you hold space for that and acknowledge like this is normal. This is what everyone else experiences when they are like have a challenging topic or a challenging class. And you said this best. It's like when someone has had some like a family member who's been through it, they can normalize that for them. And
Mm-hmm.
so, it's that hidden curriculum of academia
Mm-hmm.
or like being in school. It's like, oh, that's normal. Like you don't need to stress out about that. And there's so much comfort in someone telling you it's what you're experiencing, everyone else experiences. You're not alone in that. And which is the purpose of these conversations, right? You're describing
Yeah,
things. So
absolutely.
those of you listening, you hear any of these and you think, "Oh, I've had that thought." You're not alone in
Mm-hmm.
those thoughts. You're not alone, and there's power in
Right.
realizing that. Um, so as people think about, recognizing like some of the challenges they may experience, like I said, it is unique. Everyone experiences different ones. These are just some common ones. They can impact mental
Mm-hmm.
health in terms of impacting, like the sense of worrying, maybe some of those cognitive distortions, feeling like an imposter.
Mm-hmm.
But so when someone experiences that, what would you say are some practical strategies or maybe interventions that first gen college students can implement to help them prioritize their wellness and mental health? Like disrupt that spiral of stress, right?
Right. And I honor that in the moment it's so difficult, right? Because there's so much going on. And when I think back, right, think back to my 8-year-old self, it's like we know our brain's not fully developed, right? We know that there's a lot of other more important things
Mhm.
on. But I wish someone would have told me is like you were saying, Dr. Lizette, is just normalizing that experience, right?
Yeah.
And I know that Dr. Siegel, he coins this term called name it to tame it. So really just
Ooh,
naming it, like, you know what, I'm
I
experiencing
love
this
that.
stress and that's okay. I'm experiencing, this imposter syndrome and that's normal. And so I think whether we have that support or not, just normalizing your thoughts and feelings really is empowering, because then it reduces that spiraling that happens to all of us, right? Even myself as a therapist, that can happen so
Yeah.
quickly when I'm the first person to be talking, in front of a new
Mhm.
group. Um, so I think that's an important thing, name it to tame it. I
Yeah.
also think remembering, the protective factors. So I always think about in our lives, right, the risk factors. Those risk factors are those challenges that we're always going to have, those problems in our lives, whether it's being first gen, whether it's the financial instability, whether it's, you know, lack of support, all those risk factors, and including myself.
Yeah.
But then we have these protective factors, the shield that we build against those bad
Yeah.
things. So when those risk factors happen, we're ready for them and we're prepared for them. And so name it to tame it for sure is an important
Yeah.
thing that we need to do. I think also being mindful about your personal strengths. Like, you obviously are in college for a reason, right? So going back to that strength-based approach. So whether it's like, well, I'm in community college, because a lot
Yeah.
of people tend to minimize community college, but the reality is college, right? And
College
you're
is
in it.
college.
And so if you're in
Mhm.
it, it's like you're obviously there for a reason. So remembering those strengths. And then we at the Moreno Valley College, we really try to focus on the whole student approach. And what we mean by that is focusing on like the 8 dimensions of wellness. And I'm not gonna go into
Mhm.
detail about each one,
Yeah.
but if we really think about that, that's how we stay well and prioritize our mental health, right? It's just not one thing. I'm a therapist, I believe in therapy. But therapy is not the
Mhm.
magical answer, obviously, as you know, right? Dr. Lizette, like, it's not the magical answer. There's so many components that we have to be able to emphasize and
Mhm.
reinforce in our lives. And
Exactly.
so, if just physical, right? If you're thinking about the physical dimension of
Yeah.
wellness, sleeping, right? 6 to 8 hours a night. And I think we
Mhm.
tend to take that for granted, especially when we're young. But it's so
Yeah.
important to sleep because that's how
Yeah.
we remember information. I'm
Yeah.
also a CBT insomnia therapist, and so I really am focused on sleep because
Mhm.
what we notice at the college is that students are not sleeping, they're not remembering, they're having difficult time concentrating. It's this vicious cycle. And I get
Yeah.
it. When you're young, you have that energy. Now I can't do it, right? Eating well, the food and mood connection. Yeah. So
Mhm.
I think food and mood connection, right? I mean, our depending what we eat is how we're going to feel. And so we really try to emphasize on the food and mood connection, thinking about what are you actually eating? Are you drinking enough water? Because your brain is an organ. Your brain is made mostly of water. And without it, you're going to feel dehydrated, right? You're going to feel burnt out. And then that's going to create the vicious cycle of
Yeah.
irritability, then stress and anxiety and so on. And then exercise, right? We forget about the power of exercise too, is that we
Yeah.
know when you exercise, you release those neurotransmitters in your brain that naturally make you feel better. And so I'm not a big person to exercise, but I do practice like yoga, you know, and not like
Yeah.
extreme yoga. I'm not a big yogi, but you know, just the basics, right? Of the stretching and the meditation of it. Another
Yeah.
dimension of wellness we try to emphasize on, like you mentioned earlier, is the social aspect.
Yeah.
Is I think that when we are in that scarcity trap, we are just focused on making money, going to school, and that's
Yeah.
it. But that social aspect, surrounding yourself around safe people, right?
Mhm.
Safe people that encourage you, that are
Yeah.
uplifting, that are there to help you. In whatever capacity it is. And then, like you mentioned, attending tutoring, going to tutoring when
Mhm.
you can. I'm one to say that like math is not my strength till this day.
Yeah.
If you ask me to solve a fraction, I probably can't do it, and it's fine. I passed it. That's all I need to do,
Mm.
right? But
Yeah.
I share that with students because I think they get so fixated on the classes and the subjects they're not good at that they get so intimidated and they drop out. And so prioritizing your wellness is, you know what, going and just being honest and transparent and say, you know what, this is not my strength, but C's get degrees. Let me just pass this class and move forward and see what's, you know, what else I can do. And then, like you mentioned, the office hours, right? Going to office
Mhm.
hours. And I at our college, we're trying to call it student hours, so that it's more
Yeah.
like student ready focus. Yeah, so
Yeah.
right, student hours and letting professors know, like, hey, this is who I am, this is what I need, what I want. And I know that for sure for me, like math was not my strength. So I was at my
Mhm.
professor's student hours, office hours, like every day. Like, I don't, can you please show me? Can you please help me? Right? Because I needed to break that
Yeah.
cycle of poverty. Like, I needed to make it. And I was willing to do
Mhm.
anything to do that. Another
Absolutely.
aspect, like I mentioned, is so in the 8 dimensions, right? You can Google the 8 dimensions. But another one is
Mm.
the spiritual aspect, and not talking about religion, just spirituality, that connection to something
Mhm.
bigger than us. And that could be the mindfulness, the meditation, right?
Mhm.
The prayer, whatever it is that kind of regulates the
Yeah.
nervous system to help you feel calm. And then the one that I want to highlight really quickly is academic, because what
Yeah.
I find as a supervisor
Mhm.
at the college is that what I notice is a lot of first generation students, they're pursuing something their parents want them to pursue, or what they think
Mm.
society wants them to pursue because of money, right? Or because it's the great thing that's happening. And we know what we do is like we make a decent
Yeah.
living, but we're not making as much as other, you know, professions in the medical field. And so
Mhm.
a lot of the first generation students, because they come from from a background of poverty, they're wanting to pursue the degrees that make a lot of money, so they can help
Mhm.
themselves and their family. But the one thing that I emphasize with my students in the college is pursue something that you love, that you
Mhm.
absolutely love, because that's going to re-energize you. Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, that's what I would say. Just, really emphasizing on those things for wellness.
Mhm.
And there's so much now online, right? You can Google
Oh, yeah.
like wellness strategies all day.
Oh my goodness. No, it's such wealth of knowledge. I love all of these tips. I'm like taking notes for my 18-year-old self, like going back
Yeah.
how I wish. I mean, I'm so happy that we're having this conversation today. And I love seeing how many people are having these conversations, especially in university, community college, whatever
Mhm.
settings, educational settings, because I wish that we were having these conversations more openly when I was a student.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
because I see the benefit of it, right? And I think I'm not the only one who feels that way, because you're having that conversation with me, because I'm sure you feel the same way, Dr. Lynn. You're like,
Mhm.
I wish someone who I felt more comfortable with, who I trusted, would have pushed me a little bit or encouraged me or helped me develop a new perspective or understanding of
Mhm.
this, of what this is in this education. And I know that you mentioned like sometimes people get insecure around attending a community college, and that's a challenge.
Mhm.
But no, a community college is college. I'm right there with you. It is absolutely college. And honestly, being on the other side of it, it is one of the most desirable places to work, because
Yeah.
when you are in a huge institution, you don't get to have those one-on-one relationships
Mhm.
with students the same way you get to have them. It is so much better to be in a class of 25, 30 at a community college than a class of 300 at, your public institute 4-year college, that because there's only one professor and that's a popular class. And every
Yeah.
test is multiple choice. And I felt like I didn't learn very much in those, but I would have learned more
Yeah.
in like a 30 people class. So I know you spoke to this,
Absolutely.
and I just want to briefly highlight any other systems available for like first gen college students who may be needing or seeking mental health assistance or guidance in prioritizing their wellness. So one, we already gave them a lot of different consejos, but if there's
Mhm.
any systemic resources that you would recommend, and I'll pause it.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think checking out your local health center, right? So there's always a student
Mhm.
health and psychological services on campus. And again, just speaking for myself, I did not take advantage of that when I was a college student. I wish I would have,
Yeah,
because that's what we're there for, is to be able to help you do well, feel well, so academically you can then succeed. I think some of the larger things too is, there's a 988, right? 988 is a suicide prevention lifeline number, and that's really important to use. And so that's one thing. The text line 741-741. So if you're feeling stressed, overwhelmed, you can always connect that way. Now there's these what it's called the warm lines, right? So if you Google warm lines in California,
okay.
you
Oh,
can actually connect with someone because you're having a bad day, you feel overwhelmed, you're sad. Because obviously, as we know, right, as clinicians, we're as clinicians are not always available. Even if you have a therapist, right, you have to wait for your therapy appointment unless it's a crisis. And so, what we try to encourage are the warm lines. There's also the helpline. The helpline is in Riverside County in the Empire area, and that's
mhm.
also another kind of form of a crisis support line. But some of the larger institutional things I think that could be helpful is suicideispreventable.org, take action, which is
Mhm.
California's mental health movement, nami.org. So all of these, organizations that are credible, really. And the last one that I'll really encourage, especially if you're currently, right, a student at a community college, at a university, is look into the Active Minds Mental Health Club. So
Mhm.
Active Minds is a national organization that promotes college mental health, and that's their whole focus. But the great thing about it, it really gets the students involved to be able to do peer-to-peer empowerment and to share their own
Yeah.
stories to reduce that stigma, because it's ultimately what we need. Like, so I even think of myself, like, yes, I'm an alumni from Moreno Valley College, but I'm relatable in some ways, but I'm a professional now, so there's a power imbalance. So it doesn't matter how much I share, because I'm already here. That's how they
Yeah.
view me. But when you have that student perspective, I think it changes the dynamics of it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I love that you
Yeah.
bring up the different student organizations and peer organizations, because you're right. It's like there's so much nuance also to the first gen experience, that although we may
Mhm.
have lived it, we also lived it a few years ago, and
Yeah,
we also lived it quite differently. And so, yeah,
right.
absolutely. So tell me, Dr. Lynn, how can we support you and your work? I hear how passionate you are about supporting students and really helping them be successful.
Yeah. I mean, so I think on a, on a larger scale, I would just say that truly let's prioritize our wellness by thinking about how we can self-empower, and build that self-efficacy, right? And being able to
Yeah,
include those 8 dimensions of wellness. But on
yeah,
a professional level, my doctorate program project was actually focused on eliminating barriers for student parents because I'm a former student parent. And being a former student parent plus being first gen, that's a whole nother right dynamic, like you're mentioning. So we all have unique stories, um, but the reason why I share that is I would love for y'all to follow, my Instagram page. So I created this program called Parents Powering and Parents. Parents empowering parents so that, as student parents, we don't give up because
yeah,
student parents are experiencing a little more unique challenges, more stress, more financial problems as they're trying to get through their educational journey. And so I just tell every student parent, you are just as worthy and deserving, and capable as any other student. You just may have a little more challenges along the way. So
yeah.
I think that's probably about it. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much. And, like, I think we could have a full other conversation of what it's
Yeah.
like to be a student parent, as
Yes.
you shared that, because I I'm not a parent, was not a parent, but I had a lot of colleagues throughout my educational
Hmm.
journey who were, having that additional responsibility is what I will share in how you're navigating your day to day, and different
Yeah.
your priorities shift as well, right? And so navigating that. And so I don't know, I might have to invite you back on, Doctor. I'd like to have
Absolutely.
another
That's, yeah, we
conversation.
could definitely talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but that said, thank you so much. This has been so wonderful, so special. Like, there's so much information in this, and I can't about folks to how this has resonated for them. So thank you all who joined us today live. Please share this with anyone who you think may benefit from this. Please subscribe to never miss an episode. And episodes go live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for as long as I can do it. So thank you so much. And thank you again, Dr. Lynn.
Yeah.
Bye,
Thank you, Dr.
everyone.
Lizette.